releases. I'm a pig. Hi guys, my name is Bobby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm bringing you the top 20 books of the decade. So for me, these are my top 20 books that I read in the past decade. Most of them are newish releases. Some of these are the newer releases. In the beginning of the decade, I was reading, but not as much. So a lot of these you've probably seen more than once, but it's no shocker. Some of them I haven't talked about much on my channel because I read them before. Like, one that I will talk about shortly, I read before it got all the hype. But yeah, I have my tablet in front of me with the list because I'm recording on my phone right now. So I've got my list of 20. So let's get into it. These are in no particular order. These are just as I was looking on my shelf and writing them down. Some of these I will have to insert pictures because either I read them on Kindle, got them from my library, or friends are borrowing them at the moment. And the first one is All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood. My friend Adrienne is currently borrowing this. She's had it for like 6 months and bitch still hasn't read it yet. All the Ugly and Wonderful Things is a very sad story, but also a hopeful one. This is literary fiction done right. It is very controversial in the subject matter it tackles, and there's a lot of doom and gloom and a lot of sad things that happen, but there's hope. There's an underlying vein of hope in the story that makes you want to keep reading because eventually something good's going to happen. And eventually it does. It takes a while to get there, but that's literary fiction done right. Not just like, oh my God, my life is so sad. So All the Ugly and Wonderful Things tells the story of Wavy, who I think when it starts out, she's like 7 years old, who is neglected and abused, and her parents are meth dealers and addicts, and her mom is a horrific addict, meth, heroin, whatever. And her and her little brother are pretty much neglected, and it is so incredibly sad. And she sneaks out at night and sneaks into other people's houses and steals food, and it's got a very sad story. But there is a guy named Kellen who works for Wavy's dad, who is about 22, I think, or 21, 19, late teens, early 20s when he comes into the story. And he crashes his bike and Wavy helps him, and they develop a relationship. It starts out as friendship, and he is helping her. He like brings her food. He gets her ready for school. He buys her school supplies and all that kind of stuff. And he takes care of her. He's like the only person who's ever taken care of this poor child. And she gets really, really attached to him. And the controversial part of this story is they start a relationship when she's about 13, I think, and he's in his early 20s. So that's technically pedophilia. And it is one of those ones where you know it's wrong. And it's not super, okay, it is sexual, but Kellen stops it. It's like hard to describe because they both love each other, but it's like it's not like they're together, but they're not together. It's so hard to talk about because every time you talk about it, you always have people in the comments calling you a sick fuck and all that because you root for them. You root for them so hard, and it's hard to explain unless you read it, but I have never read a book before where I was reading about something that is so blatantly wrong. A 22-year-old and a 13-year-old should never be together, period. And it's so blatantly wrong, but you can't help but root for them. You want them to work. You want it to work. Kellen is a little bit mentally slow. And Wavy is so abused and neglected that it's like, and he's the only person that cares about her and is the only person who takes care of her. And when she falls in love with him, I think it's more of I love you because you take care of me and you're the only person who's shown me any kind of affection and care. And for him, it's kind of the same. Like he loves her because, he thinks she's a cool kid or whatever. And when the first time she tries anything, he stops her. And it's kind of like it's all that she's seen because her parents are terrible people. And I gotta stop talking about it. It is a fantastic book. It is written so beautifully. It has, for all of the dire doom and gloom and all of the terrible things that happen throughout the book to her and her brother and Kellen, there is still that underlying vein of hope that everything's going to work out. And it is just so beautifully written. I read this before I was on BookTube. I don't remember. I read it on Kindle. I do have a copy, but like I said, my friend's borrowing it. I bought a copy because I had to have one. How did I stumble upon it? I don't even remember. It wasn't, I think it was before I was watching BookTube, so nobody mentioned it. But I think it had come across in, you know, books you may like or whatever, and I absolutely fell in love with it. It was one of the best stories ever written. You know, it's very hard to read because there are a lot of, you know, like there's trigger warnings for child abuse, child neglect, drug use, drug abuse, drug dealing, physical violence. It's just, and pedophilia. But it is so, so good. Like a book that can make you question your morals and make you like, she's brilliant. Like, I don't know how she did it, because when you know something is inherently wrong, like there's no ways, ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is wrong, wrong, wrong. But for a writer to write a book so beautifully and craft a story so perfect, it makes you question everything you know and believe in. You really? Like, it's just, it's gold. It's pure gold. And it's one of those ones, like, I know Julie from Pages and Pens talked about it after she read it, and she felt the same way I did. And she got a lot of hate comments for it because people are like, you're disgusting, you're gross, you're supporting pedophilia. Like, I couldn't read it. I had to DNF it. But if you finish the story and you think about it objectively, it's not, it is such a fantastic book, but it's a controversial one. So if you go into it knowing, like, it's going to hit you in the feels. It's going to really hit you in the feels, but in so many ways, like, it hit every heartstring for me. I can't even describe it. It's just one of the best books I've ever read. It just really is. And it's in my top favorite of all time. Number 2 on the list, or that it's not, and we're not in an order, but next on the list is The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. I talk about Hearts all the time. Again, coworker has borrowed it. It is I talked about it at length in my top books of 2019. Heart's Invisible Furies is about a man named Cyril who is a gay man, and it tracks his life from birth, or before he was born, in the womb, all the way up until he was in his 70s or so. And it's broken into chunks where it's before he was born, birth, 7, 14, 21. It goes in increments of 7 years. It spans his whole life. It hits on a lot of points of oppression of LGBTQIA plus people, what it was like to be gay in the 60s and how it was illegal in Ireland, where most of this book takes place. It talks a lot about how hurtful religious oppression can be, and especially Catholicism, and how, you know, in Ireland, it was illegal to be gay. It was illegal to have kids out of wedlock, like a lot of things, and him going through it. There are mild trigger warnings for like gay slurs and gay bashing and physical violence, but it is a fantastic read. It's a fantastic look at what it meant to be gay back then, and especially in a very religious heavy country, and the evolution and how far the LGBTQIA plus community has come over the years. And it's just a fantastic book. If you are at all on that spectrum, if you are LGBTQIA gay plus, if you were any of those, you need to read this book. It is absolutely fantastic. I'm a bisexual woman, and I absolutely loved. I've recommended it to all my gay male friends. Like, you have to fucking read this book, because especially my older ones, like, my old boss, he would kill me if he knew I was saying this. He's in his early 60s, and he doesn't like people to know how old he is. But I told him he had to read it because I think it would really resonate with him. He came from a very religious Catholic family. Granted, it's not from Ireland. He's, you know, from the United States, but I think it would resonate a lot with him. But yes, fantastic. I talk about it all the time, but that, if you have not read Heart's Invisible Furies, you need to. It is an amazing story. Next is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And while I'm on that, let's do Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I read before BookTube. I read this book. It was my book of the month for June 2017. And I picked it for that month. I didn't get it later. I loved and fell in love with this book before BookTube even knew it fucking existed. This got big on BookTube last year, or I guess 2 years ago now, in 2018. And hello, like I read it in mid 2017, and I would leave comments because right when I got into BookTube, I left comments all the time. Read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and nobody had ever heard of it. And finally, it got some traction, and of course, then it exploded. Everybody knows what this book is about. This is about Evelyn Hugo, who was a huge movie star in the 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way up. She is notoriously secretive and is notoriously known for having 7 husbands. She gets, or asks this small journalist at this big magazine to write her whole life story, an autobiography or a biography of her, and she's going to give her the full scoop and tell her everything, and she does. This is told in chunks, broken up by her 7 husbands. It is fantastic. I gave it 5 stars when I read it. I absolutely loved it. It's got great bisexual rep and gay rep in here, and it's got a lot of diversity as well. Evelyn Hugo is half Cuban, half white, I believe, and Monique, who is a journalist, is half black, half white, I believe. I know she's definitely black, but I believe she's half and half as well. I believe she's mixed race. I believe she's biracial, but I know she's at least black. And then I know Evelyn Hugo's biracial. She's Cuban American. So it is a fantastic read. Most of you guys have all read this before or have heard it ad nauseum, so I'm not going to talk much more about it. Same for Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This tells the story of Daisy Jones and the Six. It is written in an oral history form about a band in the 70s and how they rose to fame and then quickly just quit and why they quit. Yeah, everybody loves this book. The audiobook, I guess, is fantastic. It is a full cast. I loved this. Absolutely loved it. She's heavily influenced by Fleetwood Mac. You can totally tell, and it shows, and it's gorgeous, and I loved it. I read it. I did not listen to it. I had no problem reading it, but I know a lot of people struggled with the physical form because the way it's written, oral history, like, if you can, focus. So you can see, like, everybody, stupid ring light. See, this is where ring lights aren't the best, but you can see that's like, dialogue, the way it's written up. But yeah, absolutely loved this one. I will read anything Taylor Jenkins Reid puts out now. I won't go back and read any of her previous because they're all like contemporary romancy and that's just not my jam. But these 2 books are fucking fantastic. I'm only going to hold up the one book, but this counts for the entire trilogy, and that's the Nevernight trilogy by Jay Kristoff. Is anyone surprised? Yeah, no? Didn't think so. I love Nevernight. I love the entire series. I've talked about it a lot. Dark Dawn came out this year. Absolutely fucking loved it. I love Jay Kristoff. We'll read anything that man writes, pretty much. In the adult section. Well, I guess, but I didn't like Lifelike. That wasn't really my jam. And that's his only, like, YA that he does. But, yeah, Nevernight. If you've not read Nevernight, you need to read Nevernight. I'm not going to talk about it too much because everybody knows Nevernight. This tells the story of Mia Corvier, who lives in, this is a fantasy, a very bloody fantasy. Her mom was shipped off to jail. Her dad was murdered for treason, and she is seeking revenge. That's all you need to know going in. Know that it's bloody, it's violent. She's an actual assassin and kills people, unlike, Selena Sardathian or whatever the fuck stupid Throne of Glass bitch's name is. She doesn't kill anybody. She just sits there and looks pretty and fawns over boys. Mia Corvier actually kills people. So, yes, Mia all the way, but this definitely, like, this helped kind of kick me into fantasy, and I love. Next, also the whole trilogy, and that's the Book of the Ancestor trilogy by Mark Lawrence. This is Red Sister, book 1. Absolutely love this trilogy. Talk about it a lot on my channel. Holy Sister came out this year and absolutely love it. There is a new trilogy, which the first book, I think it's Girl of the Stars or Girl of the Stars, I think. It's got a cover now. That comes out in April 2020. Cannot wait. New trilogy takes place in the same world as the Book of the Ancestor, but up in the ice, like part of the ice tribes, so up in the ice part. This is a fantasy story where the world is dying and they use a mirror-like contraption to reflect the moon, the light from the moon as their sun, because the sun is dying or dead. And the only place that has no ice is a strip around the equator, and that's where all the population is crammed in, or most of it anyways, and so they're always fighting for space. This tells the story of Nona Gray, who becomes a killer nun. That's all you really need to know. Fucking read this. Sam from Thoughts on Tomes read this and said she loved it, and that's why I picked it up. Can't thank her enough. I fucking love this series. This also helped me really get into fantasy. I recommend it to everyone. Everyone. Anyone and everyone. It's kind of a slow start. It does have the magic school trope, which a lot of people like, only it's more of an assassin school trope because there is magic in this world, but you know, it's different. It's very minimal compared to a whole bunch of other things. But yeah, go read Red Sister. Next, because I read these all this last year, is Illuminate Files by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. I always want to say Jay Kaufman and Amy Kristoff. I always try to mess it up. Everybody knows what this is, right? This is a YA sci-fi trilogy that is told in mixed media format. It is really fun to read. What is that, like transcripts and stuff? Yeah, see where it's like where stuff is redacted. It is really fun to read. This is told in 3 chunks. So you have the first book is from 2 characters' perspectives, and then book 2 is from 2 more, and book 3 is from 2 others. In book 1, you have Katie and Ezra, who live on an island, on a planet where it is used for mining. I can't remember what it is, some kind of gas or mineral or whatever. They are attacked by a corporation and a whole bunch of ships, and they are evacuating. So they evacuate into 2 different ships. One of the ships gets damaged in the fleeing as they flee, and so of course the corporation is chasing them at a faster rate than the ships they are on can move. So that's what Illuminate is about, and they are being tracked by this corporation. You have Katie and Ezra, the first 2 main characters. There is an AI called Aiden, and he has a big part of the story, and he's pretty fun. So like that's Aiden talking, where it's got the all black background, but it's a fantastic series, especially for YA. The mixed media format is really fun because the mixed media, like at the beginning of the book, you were reading court transcripts, and that's what everything is in here. So it is really, really fun. It's a really easy trilogy to read and get through. I also hear the audiobooks are fantastic, full cast, including sound effects. And apparently they say it's good to read along while you listen, because I don't think there is, I don't think we'll be able to find one because I'm looking for it. There is, like, in here, like, that's a good one. There's stuff like this where it shows, like, her journal where everything's, like, kind of all scribbled and written on. On the audiobook, you don't get that. You don't get, and there's, like, ship, pictures of the ship and like the blueprints of a ship and all that kind of stuff. You won't get that from the audiobook, so they say to read along while you listen. But this is a fantastic sci-fi YA series, and I really enjoyed it. Next is Priority of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Absolutely loved this book. This is a behemoth. It is over 800 pages. It is a standalone adult fantasy series that heavily involves dragons. So it is, there's a huge cast. You've got the cast on the east and the cast on the west, and it jumps back and forth between the 2. I highly recommend this. It is very easy. It's very easy to read. It's very readable. Samantha Shannon does a fantastic job. It's just thick, and it's very, very intimidating because of how big it is. It is a giant behemoth, but it is totally worth the read. I absolutely loved this book. It took me 2 months to get through, but I absolutely loved it. It's got a really beautiful female romance in here. It's fantastic. And the dragons, there's so many dragons. And the dragons in the east, is it the east, I think? Or is it the west? I think it's the east where they're bad. Bad in the east and good in the west. So you have Queen Sabran and Ede in the east, or in the west, east. Yeah, in the east. And in the east, dragons are bad. They kill, maim, terrible fire-breathing evil things. And in the west, you have Tane, who they revere them in the west. Or am I saying it totally wrong? It's probably ass backwards, because that's, leave it to me to be ass backwards. I was right. Yeah, so in the west, where dragons are revered, they're treated like gods. And there's dragon riders, and it's a great honor to be a dragon rider. So it's just good. Dragons, female romance, a really fun fantasy story that deals with gods and, you know, past and war. It's fantastic. But I understand it's very intimidating because, I mean, she a thick bitch. Next is The Savior's Champion by Jenna Moreci. Jenna Moreci is a YouTuber. She has a writer or an author tube channel, and this is her second book. Her debut was something else, but this is the start of a series. I think she said it's going to be a 5 or 6 book series. This, I'm trying to get it to where my ring light's not doing that. This is the story of Tobias, who in this world, there is somebody called the Savior, and she is not really the queen. Her dad, the sovereign, is like the king, and she is the savior, and she's the only one who holds magic in the entire kingdom. In book 1, which I'm going to warn you because people get all bitchy about it, she doesn't really go into the magic system or the world building very much because the majority, almost the entirety of this book takes place in one central location. So it makes sense. But this tells the story of Tobias, who every year or every, like, what is it, 15 to 20 years, they have what is called the Sovereign's Tournament, because once the Savior becomes of age, I believe 16 years of age, then she is to be married off, and whoever she marries will be the next sovereign. So they hold a tournament to determine who that will be. It is brutal. Tobias decides to join the Sovereign's Tournament because his sister is crippled. She was crippled in an accident, and they're having problems affording her medication. He is an artist, and he gave up his apprenticeship to be an artist to go work in the field so he could help provide for his mom and his sister, since his dad died in the accident that crippled his sister. Once he gets into the tournament, it is very brutal. They are underground in a place called the Labyrinth, and there is all these tasks set up. It is very Indiana Jones-esque in some of the tasks. You could tell that Jenna really pulled from stuff like that. But it is fantastic. I absolutely loved it. It's very bloody. It's very gory. It is full of foul language, which I absolutely love. Jenna swears a lot like I do, so I totally appreciated it. The main focus of this is the love story between 2 of the characters, but I liked the focus on the tournament as well. I mean, Jenna has said multiple times that the main point of the story is the romance, and that her romance was the main focus and what was the most important to her while writing the story. But I think she did a really good job where the romance doesn't completely take over the story, because the tournament is also very important and there's a lot going on with it, with the romance escalating as it goes through. And I really enjoyed it, and I'm not really much of a romance person, but I gave this one 5 stars. Can't wait for the sequel. Only the sequel is a companion novel. The sequel is called The Savior's Sister. And it is this exact same story, but told from a female, the main female protagonist point of view, which is going to be totally different because she's in a different part of the world. It's hard to explain without spoiling it. But yes, I can't wait to read that one because I think that's where we're going to get a lot of information about the Savior and what her power is, where it comes from, and a little bit more of the world building that we couldn't get from Tobias's perspective, because Tobias was underground for 70% of the book. And it's hard to world build when he's in a tournament for the death. He's in a fight for the death, and you're kind of stuck in one spot. But I really, really love it. I love Jenna. Go check out her channel. This was just fucking fantastic, and I highly recommend it. She is an indie published author. She publishes her books herself, so all the money goes right to her. She's fantastic. I absolutely adored this book, and it's not talked about enough on BookTube, and it's kind of hard because when it's another YouTuber who's writing the book, it makes it hard to discuss, but I fucking loved it. Go read The Savior's Champion. Should I just hold it up now so you get it over with, because I'm not going to go into detail again? Is anyone surprised? Anyone surprised? Nope. Okay, good. Also, next, anyone surprised? Anyone surprised? Kings of the Wild, Nicholas Eames. Best fantasy book ever. One of the best ones I've ever read. Hilarious. Let's see, how can I do this quickly? Because this is one of the books I've talked about 50 million times on my channel. Kings of the Wild is about a group of mercenaries who are called Saga. So the band is called Saga. They're all old, fat, and lazy, and they're all ex-mercenaries. The band broke up because they got old and decided, that's it, we're done. They're all split up. Golden Gabe is one of the, he's the leader of the group, and his daughter is in a castle across the country that is under siege by a whole horde of monsters. So he comes to our main character, Clay, and says, we got to get the band back together, and it takes off from there. It is hilarious. It is tongue-in-cheek. It pulls and makes fun of tons of fantasy tropes. It has almost every mythical creature under the sun that you could ever imagine. From what I understand, it is like a D&D campaign. I've never played Dungeons & Dragons, so I have no idea what that means, but apparently that's what they say. I fucking loved it. You need to go read it. It is a very easy to read fantasy book. It's very readable. It's very accessible to people who are not used to reading fantasy. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you go read this because it is just absolutely fucking fantastic. Next on my list is one I haven't talked about in quite a while, actually, and that's 9 Perfect Strangers by Liane Moriarty. Liane Moriarty is the author of Big Little Lies, and this was her latest release. The best way I can describe this book is The Breakfast Club for adults. That's about all I got. Group of random people who are nothing alike are locked in a space for an extended period of time, and they have to get to know each other and work together to get themselves out of that situation. I know this book got a lot of flack and a lot of shit on BookTube, but I absolutely loved it. There are some problematic elements, but there is in a lot of books. I can't remember the exact specifics right now because it's been a while. I read this in 2018. So it's been over a year, but I fucking loved it. It was when did I get it? November 2018. Yeah. So it's been about a year since I've read it. Absolutely loved this book. This book was fantastic, but that is the best descriptor for it. The Breakfast Club as adults, the adult version of The Breakfast Club. If you like Big Little Lies, you'll probably like this one, and I highly suggest you go read it. And next, which I can't wait to continue this series, Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. This is a book 1 of what I think there's 9 books in the series now. This is an sci-fi epic. It is a, what do they call it? Space opera. Sci-fi space opera. Reminded me a lot of Star Wars, kind of, and the way it is kind of structured and the way things are happening. It's just kind of crazy. This is, oh, like, how do I describe it? This is like, takes place quite a bit in the future where, Earth kind of got overpopulated, but now we have people living on the moon, on Mars, and in the asteroids, in the asteroid belt of the Milky Way, and they're called Belters, and this is kind of their story. Like, something big and dramatic happens, and our main character is kind of in the middle of it, and he's got to figure out what's going on, and it kind of takes off from there. It goes all over space. There's 2 perspectives. Oh, Holden, and then the other dude, Miller. Yeah. I like Holden. Holden's a crew. He's a captain of a ship, of his own little small little crew. Kind of reminds me of Han Solo in a lot of ways. I loved his perspective, hated Miller's perspective. Miller's a Belter cop who gets tasked to look for this girl that might have something to do with this big drama that's going on over here. And yeah, he's kind of a creeper. But I absolutely loved this for, you know, I'm trying to get into sci-fi, and this one I figured would be an easy go. And it was very, very readable, very easy digestible read, and with it being, you know, a longer good chunk of books, I'm excited to keep reading it and getting more into sci-fi. Okay, next is the Saga graphic novel series. I'm sure everybody's heard about Saga. Saga is a wonderful series that is on hiatus currently, which is bullshit because the 9th volume ripped my heart out of my chest and I just wanted to die. But it is very, very adult. There is like nakedness and sex and stuff like that in it, but it tells the story of, it's from the perspective of Hazel, who is the child in the story, about her parents who are from warring planets, and they are warring against each other, and they're different species, and they're not supposed to be together, yet they are. And so they're traveling all over the galaxy trying to escape being persecuted. Meanwhile, everybody else is chasing them down. It is a fantastic graphic novel series, and I'm not big into graphic novels, but that one is absolutely fantastic. Next is Jane Doe by Victoria Helen Stone. These are all going to be pictures up on the screen. That I read as an ebook. That is a thriller that is told from a sociopath's point of view. Only she's a sociopath, but she's using her evil for good, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Next is Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This was my introduction to Karen Slaughter. It is one of the most violent, graphically violent books I have ever read in my life. It tells a story of a woman who has a husband, and they go out to dinner one night. They go into the alley to like feel each other up, make out, whatever, be adventurous, and they are mugged. The husband is killed, and so after that, she's trying to pick up the pieces, find some things. It really unravels. Shit goes down. Not going to say much else. Just know going in, it's a very fantastic story. It's very fast paced, but it's Karen Slaughter, so it's very graphically violent. very detailed in the graphic violence, and this one is fucked up. So just know that going in, but it's fucking fantastic. Next is Bird Box by Josh Malerman. Everybody's heard of Bird Box. It became a Netflix movie. I fucking loved it. I love the suspense of it. I liked the not being able to see. Taking that away was absolutely amazing. Not going to really go over the plot. You probably all seen the movie. It's told from Mallory's perspective. There's an apocalypse. There's some kind of weird creature that if you look at it, you go insane. You either kill others or you kill yourself. So people, what little people are left in the world, are boarding themselves up or blindfolding themselves so they can't see the thing and trying to survive. This is Mallory's story of trying to survive. Oh, did I tell you she's pregnant? Yeah, there's that. Fantastic book. I won't watch the series. I don't really care to, but the book was amazing. And there's a sequel coming out called Mallory, and I believe it comes out this year. So I'm excited to check that out too. Next is The Fourth Monkey. Yeah, The Fourth Monkey by J.D. Barker. This is also an indie published book. I read this on Kindle. Fucking amazing. This is a serial killer story. And it's fucked. It's fucked up. So this serial killer, they call him the Fourth Monkey. He does, you know, the four monkeys: see no evil, hear no evil, you know, speak no evil. Yeah, he's the fourth monkey. So what he does is he abducts somebody and he kills them, but like while they're trying to find them, like it's been a while since I've read, it's been like 2 or 3 years. He starts sending body parts. So he'll send their eyes, he sends their tongue, like speak, hear, see. He sends them to the cops, and then eventually they're dead. He kills only people, he's kind of a Dexter in that he kills people who deserve it, or he thinks deserves it. You know, they're just not good people. But the cop, you're following the cop that's chasing him, but then you also get backstory of the killer's childhood and how he was brought up, and whoa, and why he is the way he is. And it was so fucking fascinating. I couldn't put it down. I actually have its sequel buried. I won an arc of it. Came out in July of 2019. And it's or no, 2018. Did it come? Was it 2018? Yeah, it came out in July 2018. I'm completely shamed and I still haven't read it yet. It came out on my birthday in 2018 and I still haven't read it yet. And it is the sequel to it, and I need to read it. The story was fantastic. It was a really fun serial killer story. And I love serial killer stories where you get to know the backstory of the serial killer and why they are the way they are. To me, that's fucking fascinating. And we got that in this book, and it was amazing. For being an indie author, I mean, he's written a couple other things, but I love this Fourth Monkey series, and I hope he keeps it going. The Butterfly Garden by Dot Hutchison. This is, it's a dark story. This is on Kindle Unlimited as well. This is a story about a guy who abducts women, and he keeps them in what he calls his butterfly garden. So it's like this underground sanctuary thing where he treats them decently well, besides the sexual assault. They have their own rooms and bedrooms and bathrooms and like clothes. Like he feeds them. He doesn't like beat the shit out of them unless they disobey. But what he does that makes it special and makes it a butterfly garden is he tattoos butterfly wings on their back. Obviously without their consent. And those are his like little butterflies. And once they get too old or get to a point where he's done or tired of them and doesn't want them anymore, he kills them. And then he preserves them and puts them in these glass cases with their arms spread out, like, so their butterfly wings, like almost like, you know, you take a butterfly and you pin it to a board, like somebody who collects them. He's a sick individual. So you are following the story of one of the butterflies from her abduction until, you know, the end of the story. This is now a trilogy, I believe. I've only read the first book because I've heard not so good things about the other two, but the first book was absolutely fantastic. The way the girls like kind of bound together, because there's like 7 or 8 or 9 of them or something like that. There's quite a few of them, and how they kind of bond together to kind of stick together, and you know, about the brainwashing and, you know, the Stockholm syndrome and all that. It was just a fantastic, fantastic book. Last on my list is kind of a campy thing, but I fucking love this series, and it's Dorothy Must Die by Danielle Page. If you're a fan of The Wizard of Oz, go fucking read this series. It is absolutely hilarious, but also really, really good, and a good twist on The Wizard of Oz. So this is a YA series. Dorothy Must Die is the story of a girl, I can't remember her name. I read these like 4 or 5 years ago. And what she did was this girl. She lives in Kansas, lives in a trailer, does her thing, but she gets swept off into Oz by these witches who want her to kill Dorothy. Because apparently when Dorothy came back from Oz and then she decided she was going to come back, and she's a wretched bitch and she took over Oz and is ruling it with an iron fist, and it's not going well. So the whole point is they want her to be the new Dorothy and to go kill the actual Dorothy. And so she travels through Oz. It's a really fun take on the Wizard of Oz, and it's a really fun take on twisting the story. And if I've read all the other Oz books, so you see other characters show up that was not in the Wizard of Oz, but it is super fun to read. Like, it's YA, but if you love the Wizard of Oz at all, I highly recommend reading. I think it's 3 or 4 books. 4 books. I highly recommend you check it out because it is a really fun twist on the story. Okay, guys, that's it. Those are my top 20 books of the decade, or books that I read in the decade. I hope you enjoyed this. I've talked about some books that I don't normally get to talk about on my channel, and some that you've heard so many fucking times, you probably just want me to shut the hell up. But please let me know in the comments down below, what were your favorite books of the decade? Did you read any of these? What did you think of my favorite books of the decade? And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.